today, Robin James is going to lead us in this pre-bid NOFA presentation. So there's a couple of housekeeping rules because there will probably potentially be quite a bit of people on this call. I believe we have about 45 registered. If you have a question, please use the raise the hand option, which is at the bottom of your screen. If you scroll over, you'll see your hand and you can raise your hand. We'll be able we'll be monitoring it and we will call on you. The other option as well is to use the chat feature. And so earlier I posted in welcome. I'm reposting again. If you don't mind, because there are a lot of people in the room, I would love to know where you're from. So if you'll just, let us, if you can type in the chat box using your agency, what agencies are represented here, that would be nice for us to know. And then I think that was it. Ashley, is there anything that I'm missing in terms of housekeeping? We do want to make sure that everybody is kept on mute, and I think we're monitoring that as well. So if you're not speaking, please keep yourself on mute. It's very distracting, the background noises. I try to minimize our background noises by threatening my children not to make noise. And so far, so good. It's only been a couple minutes. Ashley, was there anything that I missed in terms of housekeeping?
I think the only thing I add, if you're having any audio issues with your computer, in your invite, there was a call-in number, and I'll place it here in the chat box as well. You could call in if you're having audio issues, and when you call in, make sure your phone is on mute, and then if you raise your hand or you called on, just make sure you push #6 if you're using your phone for audio to unmute yourself when you're called on.
All right, great. So now I'm going to turn this over to Robin James.
Good morning, everybody. Going to start. Welcome to the City of Houston Notice of Funding Availability for Administrative Services. And I'm going to actually start by asking, because there's so many people who are on board now, I can't see all the names. So if you are a member of the Public Services staff, can you please unmute and introduce yourself, because I can't see you, so I can't introduce you for you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Riley. I am with Public Services. I'm a relationship manager.
Hi, I'm Mary Robinson. I'm with Public Services. I am an administrative coordinator, relationship manager for HOPWA, HCDD, and other things. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hi, everybody. This is David Crowell. I'm also a relationship manager with Public Services. It's nice to see everybody.
Hi, I'm Nikita Moret. I'm also a relationship manager with Public Services.
Hi, this is Crystal Perez-Ivy. I'm a management analyst with Public Services.
Hello, Maria Garcia, Public Services.
Stephanie Pena, Relationship Manager, Public Services.
And Clarence, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Good morning. I'm Clarence Mouton. I'm a member of the Procurement Services team here at Housing.
And Clarence is going to do the procurement and proposal submission section for us today.
That's correct.
Did we get everybody? I think so. Okay, well, welcome again.
We have Rupert Castillo on the line, and he is also a member of Public Services.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you. So we've got 22 folks on right now, 23 total, I think. So if I missed anybody, excuse me. I'm Robin James. I'm the Public Services Program Manager. And I did want to add one more thing to the housekeeping part that Melody did. If we were in our offices doing the regular one, we'd give you directions to the bathroom. But since we're all working remote now, you're going to have to figure that out on your own. Okay? So we've done the staff introductions, housekeeping, give you a little general information. This is the City of Houston Housing and Community Department seeking nonprofit organizations that have their 501c3 status to provide administrative services for 3 programs that we're funding. to one or multiple agencies. And it'd be for the Child Care Program, Juvenile Delinquency Prevention, and Homeless Services Program. And all programs benefit low to moderate income Houston residents. Just a little more information. In the NOFA, you would have seen the solicitation schedule. Of course, it was issued on August the 3rd. Today's the 11th. We're having the NOFA conference. And I believe Clarence said after this, we enter a blackout period. You do have a question due date on August the 18th. And you have the solicitations actually due into the office on September 3rd. Well, not into the office, but to the city by September 3rd. Notifications of intent to award, we're estimating sometime late September, October, going to council sometime in November, and estimating to start in January. So whoever's selected, we will be going into a selection process for subrecipients. So that should give you enough time to get started with the RFP process. Our current provider contract ends on March 31st, 2021. So we'll talk about a little bit about the scope of work here. I'm sure you've had an opportunity to read through the NOFA, so I'll try and skip over some parts as I can to try and keep this brief. We're seeking proposals, as I said, to provide administrative services for our child care program, juvenile delinquency prevention, and homeless services program. The term of the resulting agreement will be for 2 years with the option of a 1-year extension at the city's discretion. The NOFA involves a number of possible funding streams, which may include community development block grant, home, and state HHSP or state homeless services funds for the state of Texas, TERS affordable housing funds, emergency solutions grant, and any other funding source that is available to HCDD.
So if I can just add a little note here, the reason there are so many funds listed does not mean that those are the funds that we are necessarily going to be awarding. It's a potential to award. So we want to be able to capture the funds that we have available and that we can, that we may have access to that could hopefully give us a comprehensive package.
Okay. As you all know, Houston's undergoing a rapid change with regard to density and is expected to become the 3rd largest city, surpassing Chicago. It's the city's objective to provide valuable service to its residents to achieve a better quality of life. HCDD's Public Services Program provides funding to public and private nonprofit agencies, which offer services to benefit low and moderate income individuals and their families. The public services activities also encompass the City of Houston's Homelessness Initiatives Program, which funds activities geared toward Houston's most vulnerable citizens. With nearly a 73% reduction in chronic homelessness and 52% reduction in overall homelessness, the city continues to invest in services and to share information with other cities looking to replicate results and engage in meaningful change. Meaningful change can only be achieved through partnership with agencies working toward the same goal. Essentially, what the administrative services contract does is administer the programs as the public services division would do. You would be administering oversight over these programs. The organizations selected will provide the following services for all 3 programs. Through a NOFA process, you'll select nonprofit organizations to provide and receive federal funding and provide services. The agency would direct the allocations process with volunteers from public and private sector, including representatives from the City of Houston. The mission of the group is to set criteria for funding, review and evaluation of proposals submitted, in response to the NOFA, and select agencies for funding and make recommendations for allocation levels. All federal funds will be distributed pursuant to HUD regulations. Priority will be given to nonprofit organizations that can demonstrate an ability to administer federal funds. Following the allocations process, the agency will provide the city with a detailed summary of the allocation of funds. The summary will include a list of agencies receiving the awards, the amount of each award, and a brief description of the services the agency is going to provide. In order to measure the performance as described hereunder, nonprofit organizations receiving awards shall be required to execute a subrecipient agreement prior to being dispersed any funds. Such agreement shall be developed by the department and approved as to form by the city attorney of the city of Houston. If the city agrees to allow the agency to develop the subrecipient agreement, it shall require prior approval as to form by the city attorney of the city of Houston. I did want to make a disclaimer that I kind of skipped over. I did notice as I was going through the posted NOFA that we had some typographical errors in them, so I apologize for that. Trying to rush, keep everything on time in the middle of the pandemic and work remotely and all that stuff that everybody's doing nowadays. For the most part, it does not affect the content of the NOFA. And if we have any corrections, we'll post the corrections on the website. The selected administrative agency is responsible for the following for all activities: issuance of the NOFA and selection of nonprofit organizations, and execution of subrecipient agreements, implementation of an information and referral system, negotiating subrecipient agreements in selected agencies, development and implementation of a client registration bank for billing and reporting requirements, payment to service providers for services provided, collection of program income for submission to the city, auditing payment vouchers for compliance, monitoring service providers for compliance with all program regs, provide technical assistance, training, and resource development for your agencies, evaluation of service delivery, determining if the services are meeting the goals and objectives, providing effective control over accountability for all funds, property, and other assets under the contract, and submission of all required programmatic fiscal reports to the city. And I'll throw in the include but not limited to in this category, because there's a lot of other things that may come up during the course of the contract. But that's pretty much all the things that you'll be responsible for under this program. The three eligible activities, as I mentioned before, that we're going to be funded under this public services program are going to be child care, juvenile delinquency prevention, and homeless services. The child care program, the program goals are to provide quality. Oh, let me also state, if I think Melody mentioned this earlier, if you have questions, raise your hand. What we're going to try and do, because this can get kind of long and boring listening to me read these things to you. If you have questions, just raise your hand and we'll try and acknowledge them at least at the end of each section or as we're moving along. So child care program objectives, program goals are to provide quality child care services and parental development to a number of low and moderate income families. And I have 90 in here, and I have the number in for juvenile delinquency prevention. Those are what we have in our current contract. Those goals will be changed, and we will make that correction on the website as well. So we'll update that. Child care program objectives: provide daily opportunities for children to stimulate their intellectual, social, physical, and emotional development, to ensure adequate daily nutrition and overall health of the children to preventative measures, support neighborhood residents in their efforts to become employed and maintain employment, develop a sound financial approach to provision of child care, enhance parental development in the areas of training and skill development, in child rearing techniques, coping with stress, and child abuse prevention. Reduce or abate the neighborhood alienation and isolation found among many working parents through support services within the child care program. Okay.
There was a question, families or children for the child care goal?
It's going to be families. We count it as families, so that's who would qualify. Okay.
Let me share my screen. We are making official transition.
Please make sure you're muted.
Okay. And to address the need of child care services through a collaborated and coordinated service delivery mechanism. The objectives are to administer the City of Houston's child care funded program through Community Development Block Grant, to provide information, referral, and assistance to families seeking services, to provide service providers and technical assistance training, which is basically the information that I covered earlier in terms of the scope of services and what is going on now. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Okay. Eligibility for participation in this program as providers or subrecipient providers is to be nonprofit organizations. And we've covered the content and operations earlier. Again, I'm not going to repeat that, but it's the same 12 items that I listed earlier. Through a NOFA process, the nonprofits will be selected and subcontracted to provide the services. So we'll bypass that part and save a little time. Okay. Child care program funds a mix of child care services to answer the needs of families who require a close neighborhood location and a service that can be met without due hardship on working parents. The following is an example of such an appropriate mix. Full day child care, before and after school care, full day summer program or school-aged children, handicapped, priority status, infant care, and 24-hour child care services for children who have been abused or neglected, or those who are at risk of such maltreatment, including medical and psychological treatment services.
So just to be clear, what this particular NOFA is looking for is the administrator who will then release a NOFA that will be looking for subrecipients to deliver the services that we're talking about. So if you're a service provider wanting to provide services, it would be the NOFA that this administrator, once selected, will be putting out.
Okay, we're going to see if we have any other questions come through. And you can always ask questions later if anything comes up. We'll move on to juvenile delinquency prevention. The program goals are to provide programs to deter juvenile delinquency by focusing on the character development of children and youth. The objectives are to provide disposition alternatives to youth who are pre-delinquency or status offenders that will make a significant long-term impact on their structural employment problems, provide out-of-school youth with saleable work skills, which will make them productive members of the workforce, reinforced by the motivating influence of financial resources, promote neighborhood stabilization by taking youth off the street, providing structured activity, thereby reducing the opportunity for involvement in delinquent activities, providing a success experience for youth while upgrading their self-image, return dropout youth to classroom when appropriate and or possible, prevent, deter drug abuse and chemical dependency, provide activities for the primary prevention and corrective services, and provide activities which deter gang activity and or develop gang intervention programs.
Yeah, so there was there's a quick question. Let me just clarify this real quick. Can you please clarify the admin role in this process? What does once appointed mean? And so it's not so much once appointed, it's once that the project or once that the recommendation for funding is awarded. And so the admin role is essentially the role that the city would normally take. So in this situation, we have now distributed a NOFA, and we are looking for a provider to provide services that normally the city would provide. So they're providing them on our behalf. And so this agent or admin role then goes out and will be responsible, and that's everything that Mr. James had spoke about earlier in his presentation. They will be releasing the NOFA specifically for childcare services or specifically for JD services or the homeless services. And so what he's presenting now are the goals in which we are looking for to select subrecipients to do those particular programs. So for instance, if a NOFA came out and it was for juvenile delinquency prevention, which is what Mr. James is going over right now, these are the types of goals that we're looking for. It doesn't mean that we hit every single goal, but we do our best to see what kind of agencies apply to provide those type of services. Now, this administrative agent role can, in this NOFA, an agency can apply to administer just the child care program only, if that's what they would like to do. They can apply to administer maybe child care and juvenile delinquency prevention. They could apply to just administer homeless services, or they have the option of applying to administer all three of these programs. So it really depends on your agency, on what your mission is, on what your capacity is, in terms of what you want to apply for. But what we're going over are all three of these, and then you will be able to do this. Now, another question was asked, like, will they offer training to these roles? I know in JV, which I think you meant JD, has guidelines that we must follow. So there are guidelines that are required for each of these programs, and the administrative agent that is selected will be responsible for offering training to the subrecipients. Now, the city works very closely with the agent that is selected, but it is the expectation that whoever is applying for these funds has, one, done the research and looked at the regulations and understand the regulations, and then two, has really looked at this NOFA and has determined that their organization does have the capacity to be able to answer and to provide responses to all of this. So it is a huge undertaking, but that's why we're here to do this. Okay, Robin, go ahead.
Okay. So we'll go to the project objectives. Again, to administer the city's program is basically everything that Melody just went over. So we can actually skip over that part and save some time here. Again, it's going to be the same program, it's the same responsibilities or content for each program. So we'll move on to homeless services. Homeless Services program goals to provide essential and supportive services to the homeless in Houston, to rapidly rehouse homeless persons and families, and to meet the cost of operating emergency shelters. Program objectives to provide essential supportive services to the homeless, to meet the cost of operating shelters and facilities for the homeless, to provide safe and sanitary shelter, rapidly rehouse homeless families, provide financial assistance to same families at risk of losing their permanent housing. Project goals are to address the needs of Houston's diverse homeless community through collaborative and coordinated service delivery mechanism for the homeless and near homeless individuals and families residing in Houston. Program objectives are what we've discussed already, which is to administer the program and all of the activities that we listed earlier. Eligibility for nonprofits participating in this program. These funds will be distributed to nonprofit agencies that are specifically contracted to provide emergency shelter, homeless prevention, and/or rapid rehousing for persons fleeing domestic violence.
So Robin Myrtle has two questions. She has the JD goal is that families or children, and then the homeless services program goal not listed for number of families. So you want to take that?
I think with juvenile, it's going to really depend on the age of the person receiving services. We've done individuals in the past versus families. But I think if it's a minor child, it's probably going to be the family that's receiving the services. We go up to, I believe, age 25 on juvenile delinquency prevention in terms of providing services. So if you're talking about an adult who's over that age, then of course they will be the ones to qualify.
And then in terms of the number of homeless persons listed in terms of the goal, that's really going to be contingent on funding that is available. And so that will be negotiated at the contract time. And so there is no number there. There is some flexibility in terms of, how much or what, we think can be serviced under the funding. So there's another question asked about, can funds be used to construct housing for the homeless, such as an emergency shelter, dormitory, etc. So here's the thing, this is service funding. So this is not, we are not interested in construction with these particular funds. So public services, as a general rule, when we talk about public services, and again, I'm going to say generally speaking, because sometimes there are some outliers, it is non-bricks and sticks. And so when we think about construction, we usually think about multifamily or public facilities, and there are counterparts that have the expertise of construction. So public services is the ones that is the division that offers services directly to agencies who directly offer it to the beneficiary.
And just to circle back and reiterate what Melody is saying, all of these programs, if we have the numbers in them, that's the numbers we currently have for this current year's goals. We don't know how much is going to be available at this point, so we really don't have a goal in there. So if you see a goal, we'll make the correction on the website. I believe we've got a goal in the juvenile delinquency prevention as well. The goal would be negotiated after the funding's determined. So some detailed specifications for public services funding, timely expenditures of funds. HUD regulations require timely expenditure of funds. Agency must be able to begin expenditure of funds within 30 days of application approval. New projects and programs should be able to demonstrate that funding needed for ongoing operation of the project program will be available. Premature committing or expending of funds. Program expenses that have been committed or spent prior to City Council approval, environmental clearance, and execution of a contract or letter of agreement are not eligible. There'll be no letter of agreements in this. This is going to be strictly contract. Clarity of NOFA contents. The content and clarity of your application are critical. Agencies should take extra care in developing a clear, concise program design and measurable results-oriented goals. Non-discrimination and equal opportunity. All activities funded with public services resources must be made available for all eligible persons without respect to race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, familial status, or handicap. Environmental clearance. Projects funded under public services are subject to the environmental review requirements under federal regulation, and no funds can be committed or expended until the activity has received an environmental clearance. No exceptions be made.
Yeah, so let me just kind of explain that because that's like HUD language. So environmental clearance is done as a regulation requirement for HUD. And typically it's a bigger deal when it comes to construction projects. So even for public services, and what this means is that if we tell you and we talk about like, hey, we want to fund your project, it is only approved by City Council. City Council is the only entity that can actually approve a contract. And once they approve that contract, only then, and based on that contract, and I keep saying contract, and I need to correct myself, it is a subrecipient agreement. So once City Council has approved the subrecipient agreement and it's fully enforced, only then can funds be expended. So if your if your subrecipient agreement has a start date of September 1 and you're spending funding on August 30th, specifically for this program, the City of Houston will not honor that because it has to be done based on the clearance. And part of that clearance is the environmental clearance. So there is a process in which we go to. So sometimes the HUD rules get a little confusing. We won't even go to City Council until that environmental clearance is approved. So just be aware that, you know, should you be interested and should we be working and negotiating a contract, it is not approved until City Council actually approves it. And I really do need to get better at changing my language. It's a subrecipient agreement. It's not a contract. There is a question in here about housing. And so let me just answer that really quickly. The question was, are we placing them in housing like deposits and rent? So again, this particular NOFA is for the administrative agent. When we talk about homeless services and the administrative agent then puts out a NOFA specifically for homeless services, we are looking at a variety of different activities that Mr. James has gone through. And so most of that is going to be operations for shelter services. It could be prevention dollars. And again, it's all determined on what is available in terms of award, and we don't have those specific amounts yet. Deposits and rent are typically done on a rapid rehousing type of activity, and rapid rehousing is not an activity that we're looking to fund in this future agreement. So that rapid rehousing is done separately within the Way Home system. So typically we only are looking at operations of shelter and homeless prevention. All right, go ahead, Robin.
Okay. Also, I believe if you all, so Melody, have to repeat your questions. I believe we also have it set up so that if you raise your hand, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, add a little variety to it so that you don't hear me drone on the whole time. Match requirement in leverage funding. A match requirement is required, or funding match is required on ESG funding in a dollar for dollar basis. All other grants used are not, they don't have a requirement for matching funds. However, agencies are encouraged to provide in-kind or financial contributions that can be used for leveraging and will receive priority consideration for such contributions. Leveraging is based solely on the program for which funds are being requested and must have documentation presented. And I'm kind of glad you're seeing it, Melody, because I'm not even seeing the hands go up, so I'm glad you're catching the questions. Part 3. Evaluation and selection process. There's an evaluation committee. The evaluation committee shall evaluate the proposer's submissions in accordance with the evaluation criteria listed in item D below. Upon completion of the evaluation, the committee may develop a short list of proposers meeting the technical competency requirements. The shortlisted proposers may be scheduled for structured oral presentation, demonstration interview, and negotiations. Following these city to proposer meetings, the evaluation committee will summarize their findings and recalculate the scores if needed. However, the evaluation committee reserves the right to issue letters of clarification when deemed necessary to any or all proposers. The oral presentations, demonstrations, and/or interviews may be recorded or videotaped. The city reserves the right to request a proposer to provide a final presentation handout of its proposal at scheduled meeting. No proposer may attend presentations of other proposers. If necessary, proposers may be scheduled for more than one presentation, demonstration, or interview. Selection process, the city intends to select a proposal that best meets or proposals that best meets the needs of the city and that provides the best overall value. The city reserves the right to check references on any projects performed by the proposer, whether provided by the proposer or known by the city. Upon review of all information provided by proposers, the evaluation committee will make a recommendation for selection to city officials. Upon approval of the selected proposers, a contract shall be executed by the appropriate city officials. We do have the evaluation criteria. If there's anything specifically, Melody, that you want to touch on, otherwise I'll let you all read those individually. I'll just touch on the actual headings. Proposed strategy and operational plan. It's just a pass-fail versus points awarded. Where we go.
The only thing I can add to this is that, and I say this at every pre-bid, and so I say this with kindness, and I hope it comes out that way, is when you look at the evaluation criteria and you read and you go through it, this is written in a way that allows us to actually evaluate your proposal. So you're going to want to address and answer everything that we have included in this particular piece. I always tell agencies, my recommendation is that once you write and you put this NOFA together for us to submit, have somebody who is a part of your organization who did not participate in writing this read it and have them try to evaluate it. And that's going to be your best way in terms of prepping for submission to us, because it's laid out pretty clear, and we do that intentionally because what we're asking for is different parts of how we are going to rate your application. There is a couple of questions, and the one I don't have an absolute answer, and that is regarding, can a 501c3 be sponsored from out of state of Texas in partnership with a Texas agency? And if not, is there a minimum of how long the 501c3 must have been established in Texas? I will say that we do run, I believe it's the Secretary of the State check to make sure that the nonprofit is in good standing with the state of Texas, and that is a requirement from the city of Houston. So, so you would want to make sure that the entity that is applying is in good standing with the state of Texas. And I hope that answers. If that doesn't answer, please write another question, and then I will get clarity. And then, do we anticipate to fund multiple administrators depending on the agency's experience? Possibly. It depends on what applications that we get in and what happens through this rating and the evaluation piece, right? So there is an organization that is applying for one specific role. Let's say it's childcare, and they're able to do that, and they meet all the requirements. And when we look at the evaluation and the criteria and the matrix, there is some points that are being awarded, et cetera. If they seem like, in the way that we do this, if they are the best fit for that particular role, then it is quite possible that we award that entity one. And then there may be an entity that's really good at homeless services and juvenile delinquency prevention, right? And if everything, you know, pans out, then we may do those two to one administrator. So it really depends on the applications we receive, and what the criteria and what the evaluation in terms that we're able to look at. So it's not just pass or fail, yes or no. It really is going to be dependent on the applications we received and how individuals, organizations want to, what their capacity is and what it looks like. So I hope that answers your question. Let me know, Eva, if that didn't answer your question.
And actually, I think that will actually recover the entire evaluation and criteria piece. All the detailed information is written there. I think Melody covered it quite well. So rather than go through it individually, I'll let you all read that. And if you have any other questions, let us know. And at this point,
I'm going to. What about format, Robin? Did you have format written in this, like, you know, 12 fonts, so many pages? Was there any type of format?
It's here. I was going to speak on that in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in there. Okay. Any other questions right now for the programmatic piece? If not, you can always ask your questions at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to let Clarence go ahead and take over at this point to do the proposal submission and requirements process.
Good morning again. My name is Clarence Mouton, and I'm a member of the procurement services team here. So I'm going to provide an overview of parts 4 through 7, which includes the submission, the exceptions, special conditions, and general instructions. So in the instructions, the submittal, so what you need to do, all proposers are required to submit at least 5 copies, okay? One should include an original copy, and that a copy should be signed in blue ink. Also provide 5 flash drives. So just go ahead, just download your information onto a flash drive and submit the proposals to the city secretary's office by the due date. And be very careful. Don't be a minute late because they will not accept it. So make it attention to Tawana Roan to her attention with the city secretary's office by that due date. The time of submission, as I said, September 3rd is our deadline to have those proposals in. And here's the format, Melody. So they want to have it left bound with information on both sides, okay? 12 font, double spaced, and it should be organized according to the checklist, if I'm correct. And please note, 5 points will be deducted if it's not submitted in the proper format. Okay, and 4 and 5 is just general information, complete submission. I spoke about the timely submission on number 5. We can go on to the requirements here, part B. So there's a title page, and you'll see that in an exhibit soon. There's a title page, a checklist, which basically what I would do is just have tabs for each one of those that's listed on that checklist. So it will make it really, really simple just to go through and evaluate your proposal. All right, so then after that, just the narrative, you're gonna have the narrative, and then the exceptions to the terms and conditions, right? And I'm gonna read this one because it's kind of a legal issue, but I'll read it. All exceptions included in the proposal shall be submitted in a clearly identified separate section of the proposal in which the proposal clearly cites the specific paragraphs within the NOFA where the exceptions occur. And then you can just go ahead and basically continue to read all of that. But it's general, just general information, general terms and conditions. Then the part 6 is this no contact period. So what that means is after today, the only person that you should contact is Tawana Roan. So you're going to provide all of your questions by email to Tawana by the end of August the 18th. So what they call is the no contact period or the quiet period. So you don't send Robin an email or Melody an email, send them directly to Tawana Roan. All right. And then protest, basically, that's just City of Houston information of policy and procedures, cancellations. Basically, the city has sole right, basically, to cancel this NOFA and all proposals received prior to the awarding of the contract. And then you have more, basically, City of Houston policies and procedures here. Anti-boycott of Israel, executive order, and then part 7, which is where we are now. We're here at the conference, right? We know the date. And then part B basically just tells you, okay, send everything to Tawana Roan via email. Send your questions no later than 2 o'clock. Okay. It says, let's see, what she's saying here, August 27th. But we're going to have to get some clarification on that. And all of your questions will be, you will be notified in writing. You will receive an answer to your questions and a letter of clarifications, and they will all be posted on our website. And so all of the agencies that apply will be provided a copy of it on our website to any letters that Tawana posts on the website. Let's see, examination. Each proposal shall clarify. Any questions? Okay. Any proposal shall carefully examine all NOFA documents and familiarize yourselves with all of the requirements prior to submitting a proposal. So as Melanie said, make sure that you get a second opinion, eyes on that proposal so that you can provide us with a very, very solid proposal. And then the post proposal is the city's intent, right, to commence final negotiations with the proposal deemed most advantageous to the city. All right, and as I said, the city has the right to do that. And then the other documents that you see here are exhibits. So part 1 of that exhibit starts on page 17, Ashley, and it is the checklist that I spoke about earlier. So it says part 1, you'll have the checklist, you'll have the title page, and then you'll have the content. So I recommend that everyone make sure you have a tab labeled with each one of these so that it'll make it very, very simple to go through and evaluate your proposal. And then that way you won't omit anything that they're requiring to have in the proposal. And then let's see, here's the title page. Is she not on page part 2, Ashley? Is she there? Hello, Robin?
I'm here. It's not showing. It's screen sharing. I'm on page 2.
Yeah, I'm seeing page. I don't see the title page on the screen.
Yeah, it's not moving. I still see page 15 on my screen.
Yeah.
Ashley, you want me to share it?
Yeah, is it sharing now? I stopped screen sharing and reshare it. So do you guys see it now?
It hasn't come up yet. What is going on?
Melanie's got it.
I have it open.
Okay, go to page 18, please.
This is 18. Can you see it?
it says title page. Is that it? Title
Yes.
page? Yeah, okay. So this is the title page, everyone. So make sure you have all of the information here that's requested on this form. All right. And then the other exhibit, it just tells you, it
And
just
here you
explains.
want to make sure that it's notarized. Sometimes this doesn't get done. You're certifying that you have the authority to apply for these funds.
Thank you. Thank you, Melly. Yeah, you are correct. It does say notarized. So make sure that document is notarized. Part 3 is just content and explains exactly what is required in your proposal. Okay. Part 3, program objectives and your plan, organizational information, funding information, results and evaluation.
So one thing, let me just stop right here real quick. Specifically for number 5, your capacity, we're also looking for the cash flow reserve, right? So we want to be able to see, that you have the ability to actually fund this program. And so what does that look like? Now, I know there was a question in the chat box about what was the funding, how much can we apply for funding? And I didn't see that in the NOFA. So we're going to have to do some clarification on that. But essentially for JD and childcare, we usually use a roundabout number of $450,000 for each of those particular projects. And then there's typically a round number of approximately $1 million for homeless services program. Now, we could use those as planning numbers, and we can put that in a clarification so that everyone is aware. But again, during the negotiation part of this, we'll have firmer numbers to say, okay, it's actually X amount of dollars coming from this funding stream and this amount of dollars coming from this funding stream. But our history shows us it's around $450,000 for childcare services, $450,000 for juvenile delinquency prevention, and approximately $1 million for homeless services.
Thank you, Melody. All right, so let's continue on. And these are other exhibits that must be submitted, authorized signatures. Basically, the director must sign off on those forms and provide names and titles of all officers. Certification, there's another form, certification of nonprofit eligibility, that document.
And we do want to see your 501c3 documents, so just copy that. I know some of you may have it from like 30 years ago, whatever, but there's also one that renews it and that says that you are eligible and you're in good standing as a 501c3.
Yeah. And so part 7, accounting system, that document. Part 8, this is a security policy, general policy. These are basically HUD regulations, part 9. And the conflict of interest form, let's see, is that next? Yeah, the conflict of interest form, board of directors roster. Now, is this a required form, Melody, part 10?
Yeah, so the board of directors, way we use this is because when we look and do your fair campaign ordinance or your affidavit of ownership, we also need to have the board information. And so again, there's directions that are in bold, and usually when things are in bold, they're pretty important, like do not include initials. So when we run tax checks on your board, we can't do it with the initials, and we have to have an actual address.
Thank you. All right, is part 11.
So this is the leveraging of your funds. So leveraging and match are not a requirement for this particular grant. However, it is part of the rating criteria. And we want to know, is your organization have any type of leveraging funds that they can bring to this? Are they able to bring any funds to marry with our funds to make a comprehensive program? It doesn't, if you don't, it doesn't mean that you're out in terms of getting an award. But this is something that we use for two reasons. One, we want to see if there's any equity from an organization who's applying for funds. And then two, HUD likes us to tell them what are we leveraging within the system, within the program, what other dollars are coming together to form a project. So we do look at this. We do end up putting some of this funding, once we're able to verify it, into our HUD system of the agency that we award.
Okay, and Melody, on part 12, activity plan and project, can you provide some
Robin,
overview on that one?
did you have something here that was deleted?
It should be actually, I have it earlier under the scoring criteria.
So typically what is here is a sort of a table that says, you know, quarter one, we're going to hire up, quarter two, we're going to be at, you know, 30% of our goal, you know, and it lets us know exactly how your program is going to progress over the first 12 months. So Robin, I'll need you to look at this to see how you want to handle part 12, and we can put that in a clarification. If you want to delete that, or if you want to add a table there, we'll put that in.
But okay, I caught up with you. I've been having problems with finding my cursor, actually. I left that blank intentionally so that if you can actually insert whatever your timetable is, your implementation schedule into it. Previously, we actually had a form that we had there, but the form isn't applicable for this.
Okay. So we'll just do, when we do the clarification, and I'm not sure, Robin, if you're taking notes or if Clarence is, but we do the clarification, we'll just clarify that part 12 is done as a narrative for each organization to explain their implementation plan.
All right. And then part 3, Melody, certification regarding location of facilities and shelters.
Yeah, part 13. This is something that they've always had us put in. So just please go over this. And essentially it's basically saying that you're not near certain places. And if you are, why are you? If you have questions with this, please, there is there's a contact information here if you need more information.
All right. And then the part 14 is other supportive documentation, and it says what we will or will not accept. It says we will not consider proposals lacking a required supportive document. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we need to see your articles of incorporation or your charter.
Okay.
Your bylaws or your rules, right? And usually that's kind of together. Your last financial audit. We want to know what you're doing. Are you a healthy organization? Is this an organization we should be investing in? And don't let your financial audit scare you, because we have had audits come in where agencies have had findings. We still funded them, but we want to look at that so that we can see how did you resolve that. Your occupancy permits. You know, if you are, you know, I don't know, you're applying for funds and you have an office, you should have an occupancy permit to make sure that your employees are in a safe place. You're also going to request this information from the subrecipients that you end up getting into contracts with, agreements with. Your lease. So if you are requesting funding for part of your lease, we need to see that lease. If you have licenses that, you know, because you're going to hire somebody with a specific certification, and so you're hiring them at a higher rate, we want to be able to see those licenses. Just telling us that isn't good enough. And then there is some additional exhibits that are required by the City of Houston, which is your anti-collusion, conflict of interest, and then your affidavit of ownership. And so I will say that the biggest piece here and the most confusing one is the affidavit of ownership. If you do it wrong, it's okay. We will call you and ask you to redo it. Just don't leave it blank.
And it has to be notarized.
Correct.
Yeah, it has to be notarized.
So there's
Also,
your answer. Go ahead.
Also, I'd like to add that if I'm sure most of the agencies are registered with the City of Houston, but if you're not, just go to purchasing.houstontx.gov and register at that website. Also, because we're receiving federal funds, I think you might want to take this opportunity to register with sam.gov, because it takes at least 30 days before they actually register you with their website. And if you have any other questions, just go ahead and submit them to Tawana Roan. Thank you. I'm done, Melody.
All right, thank you. There was another question
go ahead.
About once the admin agency is selected, will they select the servicing agency or they select it simultaneously? Once the agency is selected, the admin agency, it is the expectation that the admin agency then goes and does a separate NOFA specifically to make selections of subrecipients to carry out the program. There was another question about the supportive information required. Is it, per each program? So is it like if you're applying for JD, do you do the supplemental information? If you apply for childcare services, do you also include it there? It's going to be per applicant. So if the applicant itself, if ABC organization is applying for all three of the areas that we've talked about, JD, childcare, homeless prevention services, then we only need that supplemental information, that supportive information one time, right? Because it's going to cross over all three of them. So I don't need you making extra copies and extra stuff for each of those.
We have a question, the number of proposals to submit, whether it's one original to make 5. It's 5 total written copies. One of those hard copies should be an original signed in blue ink. So it would be correct. A total of 5.
That's correct.
What is the weight of the leveraging since it's not required?
So it's based on percentage, right? And so at least it should be. And let me go back just to clarify, because we should have some criteria in here on leveraging. But typically it's a percentage of your, yeah, it is. Okay. So you're going to look at page 12. It's spelled out. And I'm going to share my screen again. So it's done on what you're bringing. So if it's less than 25% of what you're asking, what you believe that you can, that you're asking for, then it's a 0. You get 0 points. 25 to 49, 3, 50 to 74, 5, 75 to 110, more than 100, you get 15 points.
Okay. What's the idea cash flow for juvenile prevention?
So it's going to be 30%, essentially 30% of your ask, right? So if you're asking for $120,000 to run a program, then we're looking at you having 30% cash in hand, so that everything is done on a reimbursement basis. So this is a reimbursement program. Anytime we have federal funds, it's always done by reimbursement. We can't issue out a check until we see that the cash has been drawn down. And so we want to make sure that we don't put an organization in a bind when it comes to cash flow.
How many agencies will be selected per 3 highlighted goals? I'm assuming that's touching back on the 3 programs that we're funding. And like Melody mentioned earlier, we can have 1 agency per program. We can have 1 agency that does 2 programs. We can have 1 agency that administers all 3 programs. I don't see us doing more than that number, more than 3. But we'll see how it goes.
I don't see any reason I would do more than 3 administrators. And I will say historically, we've had 1 administrator probably for the last 20 years. So we're open to changing that up, but it really is just dependent on who is applying. And if you're thinking about like the goals, like let's say we want to serve 1,000 people under homeless services, and I'm just throwing that number out, then how many subs would you then try to enter into agreements with? Again, it's really dependent on what is being proposed, and if there's no real type of formula to say for 1,000 clients, we're going to, and let's say an emergency shelter, right? 1,000 clients in emergency shelter, we only need 1 provider. That's not necessarily, accurate. It could be that you need 4. It depends on what you're trying to serve, who you're trying to serve. Are you serving victims of domestic violence? Are you serving youth? It really depends. And once we get into the admin contract, there will be additional dialogue with the city around those goals and around, like all of that kind of subrecipient agreement awards and goals and how we get them. And so we've done this a long time and we have a lot of experience doing this. And so we don't want somebody, if you have different opinions and different ways and methods, then we absolutely love to hear dialogue, but there are some realistic goals that we are aware of and that we will share.
And I think that kind of circles back to that other question. When I hear that, I think this question is how many agencies per activity or per program. And I think that's what that question was, not so many how many administrative agencies, but how many subrecipient agencies will be provided per program. And again, like Melody said, it just depends. It's going to depend on what is determined to provide the services we're looking to do, whether it's juvenile delinquency prevention or child care. We're trying to service the areas of the city that need service in it and do it most efficiently with the funds that are available. So I think that decision would be made at the time that the nonprofit agencies are being selected. To clarify, once the admin agency is selected.
Oh, we did that question already.
You did that one already? Okay, supportive information required for each program or just one?
We answered that.
Okay. I do see you answered that one. Okay, let's scroll down. Why isn't the city of Houston serving as administrator?
Mm-hmm.
What is the benefit
so
of
I'll take that
outsourcing?
question. Yeah, I'll take that question. So why isn't the city of Houston serving as administrator? What is the benefit outsourcing at this time? So that's a really good question. When we administer programs internally, I have both a ceiling and a floor to my program. So my floor is $100,000. We do not entertain contracts less than $100,000. It costs the same for us to run a $100,000 program as it does to administer a $1 million program. So there is another benefit as well, right? So when we talked about JD and childcare and even homeless services, we said $450,000. I know that I think last year with our childcare programs, we had approximately 6 or 7, and I could be wrong, but it's around 6 or 7 subrecipients that were performing childcare services. Now, if an agency who is under an agreement is unable to provide or spend down their funds, then the administrative agent that we are funding can go into their contracts and move money around. So agency A, was given, we'll just say $100,000. Agency B, for some reason, was given $75,000. And agency B is flying through their money. They're serving. They're doing, awesome. Agency A is doing awesome, but they didn't actually. They're not on track to spend the $100,000 because perhaps there was cost savings. Perhaps they had a reduction in staff. I have no idea. So the administrative agent can go in and say, hey, agency A, you're not going to spend $25,000. So I'm going to move that $25,000 over to agency B because they have the ability to spend this money. And so they can do that. Now, the city of Houston, if we wanted to do that with specific programs, that requires a council action. And to get to council is usually about a 90-day process. And so what would end up happening is that we would end up, probably not spending all of our money. It would cause a lot of just a lot of red tape. So having an administrator allows us additional flexibility, and it also allows to fund smaller amounts of agreements, right? So under $100,000. So the next question. So hopefully I answered that. Jennifer, let me know. Was that Jennifer or no? That was Leah Jean. So hopefully I answered your question. If I didn't, please let me know where I can clarify. Another question regarding administrative roles. If the agency I work for received the funding and we have an administrator appointed, can we use the funding within the programs we have under our organization, or are we needing to use them to fund outsource other organizations who can also provide the services listed in the NOFA? I hope this makes sense. Yes, it does make sense. So then you have to understand that there's competition, right? So as an administrator, the role is an administrator. If you also are an agency that's able to provide, and we're going to just use childcare services, right? You're able to utilize childcare services, and your agency does that, then are you limiting competition? Are you, there is a sense of lack of fairness. And so the administrator really is not going to be doing the program itself. The administrator is doing exactly that, the administration of the program. If proposing all 3 programs, is the application combined for all 3 or 5 copies for each program proposed? Let me get some clarity on this, because there's a change I would like to propose. And so at this time, if your agency is proposing all 3 programs in the application, you're not going to be able to combine them because we will most likely be looking at them separately. So it does need to be separate. But let me get back to you on that specific question. We'll have to do a clarification. So the questions that are being asked here, I believe, are being recorded, and we should be able to put them all in writing and put them online. And that question regarding the application of combining, we will go ahead and put that in the clarification. For the homeless administrator, will the funds include any CARES Act money through the CDBG funds? No. So this is only for entitlement funds. And so for those of you that aren't aware, there is, the City of Houston is a recipient of CARES Act funding. We received quite a bit of money. I want to say, I don't remember off the top of my head the exact amount for CDBG, but in combination of both, there's been 2 allocations. There's a CDBG COVID dollars, ESG1 COVID, ESG2 COVID, and then HOPWA COVID. And for all of those came from the original CARES Act that was passed back in April. And it was approximately $40 million to the City of Houston. The City of Houston is part of what we call a citywide COVID housing plan, CCHP. We love our acronyms, and I'm happy to remember them. And so our CARES funding, we have strategically put that particular funding with that plan as a collaborative funding opportunity. So those dollars are not a part of this particular funding. Now, I say that, and life changes. And in the NOFA, you will see, I think it was on page 2, Robin said the money we're looking for, or that we may be putting into here, is CDBG, home, ESG, HHSP, or any other funding that the City of Houston may have. So at this point, the answer is no. Is there a possibility? I don't know, that, we may get a full moon on Halloween, and that's a possibility. So it's potential, it could happen, but right now the plan is not to have the CARES Act as part of this funding. There's also an additional complication with that, is that the CARES Act funding, per the Federal Register, has a little bit of nuanced changes that could potentially make it very complicated for an agency to have that money mingled in with these other funds. All right. Any other questions? I think I've answered all of them in the chats.
Yeah, I don't think we missed anything. If we missed your question, please hold your hand up. And if we haven't missed anything, does any of our staff have anything to input? Comments, questions?
We did have one comment from a staff, and on that title page where it asks for all that information, we didn't require that a vendor number be included, but Clarence did allude to, if you have not done work with the City of Houston, you're going to want to get a vendor number. It is super helpful when preparing documents. So it's not a requirement, but if you want to make things a little bit easier, applying for a vendor number now will make the agency and our lives much easier. And should you ever want to apply for any other funds through the City of Houston, you will always have to have that vendor number. So it is a good practice.
Helps us get you paid and go through the contracting process much quicker.
All right. Well, I think that's it. Thank you for joining us. Wait, I heard something. Is that somebody saying something? No. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us, Robin. You did an excellent job. You're getting kudos on chats. And we look forward to receiving the applications.
And I do want to, again, address the numbers that are in there, like Melody talked about. Those are current numbers. Don't base your proposals on those numbers. We will make that a correction in online as well.
Hello.
Right. Yes.
Hi, this is Rosalind Francis from Steady Guys, and I'm on audio. And I was calling to see if you guys can actually send a copy of the PowerPoint presentation.
So this wasn't a PowerPoint presentation. This was the actual NOFA itself. So somebody did add the NOFA link into the chat, and
yeah, and actually it should be in the registration form that you got from Ashley.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, anybody? And I saw a couple of people had to be removed from the meeting. Hopefully you were able to join in. Ashley did warn us earlier that sometimes you don't realize you're unmuted. And if she's picking up a lot of noise, if she has to remove you or unmute you, then you're removed from the meeting. So if you did get kicked out, hopefully you call back in. That's what happened. No intention to put anybody out of the meeting because they didn't laugh at joke about bathrooms and stuff. So it's okay. Thank you very much for your attending the meeting, and be safe.